funny how quickly you can fall back into the rhythm of a thing. A week ago, I was easing back into all this, feeling more than a little rusty. And now I'm out here every morning like I never stopped. One of the very first jobs I came back to was the compost heap, which had been sitting completely ignored the whole time the channel went quiet. Poking through it this morning, I got thinking about compost, obviously, because it's one of those things that almost nobody gets told to do, and almost nobody gets told how to actually do it well. You hear, oh, start a compost pile, and it's the simplest thing in the world, right? Just make a pile. And it can be, but there are two things about it that I had to learn the hard way, and two things that nobody ever seems to mention. And getting them right is the whole difference between rich, dark, crumbly compost and the sad, slimy mess in the corner that puts you off ever trying again. So let me try to save you the trouble. First thing that nobody tells you about is the smell. If your compost heap ever starts to stink, and I mean really stink, that sour, rotten, eye-watering sort of smell that most people just assume they've done something terribly wrong, and that composting simply isn't for them. And then they give up. But a smelly pile is not broken. It's actually trying to tell you something very specific about it. It's too wet. It's packed down too tight. And it's run completely out of air. Here's what's gone on there. You've put in loads of soft, wet, green stuff. Grass clippings, kitchen scraps, all of that. And nowhere enough dry, brown stuff to balance it all out. So it's all sludged down into an airless, soggy mess, and the wrong sort of bacteria have moved in and taken over. The kind that work without any air and give off that awful smell as they go about it. The fix is pretty simple. Once you know it, add browns, dry leaves, torn up cardboard, shredded paper, a bit of straw. Mix them through it. If it helps, just think of it as like a rough balance. Greens are the wet, fresh things, and the grass and the scraps and the green leaves. Browns are the dry, papery things. Most people are absolutely swimming in greens and badly short on browns because the browns are exactly stuff we tend to throw out without a second thought. The cardboard, the fallen leaves, the empty cereal boxes, start hanging on to those. And you'll never have a slimy heap again. And give the whole heap, a good turn with a fork to get the air back into it. Within a few days, the smell goes and the right kind of breakdown takes back over. A healthy compost heap should be earthy and sweet, like the floor of a wood after rain, never sour. If it smells bad, it isn't failing, it's just crying out for browns and gasping for a bit of air. The second thing nobody tells you is almost the exact opposite problem, and it catches people out just as often. Sometimes a pile does nothing at all. You build it, you wait, and months later it's still just a pile sitting there, looking pretty much identical to the day you made it. Twigs still twiggy, leaves still whole, nothing rotting down in the slightest. And again, people decide that they failed at it. 9 times out of 10, that pile is simply too dry. This is the one that genuinely surprised me. We picture compost as this wet, rotting sort of thing, so it never even occurs to us that it might need watering. But all that breaking down is done by living creatures, microbes, worms, that sort of thing. And living things need moisture to do their work. The bone-dry pile is stuck on pause. Everything in there is just sitting about, waiting for water that never comes. So in a dry spell, you actually want to water your compost, the very same way you'd water plants. And the target is easy to remember. You want it to be damp, as wet as a cloth you wrung out. Squeeze a handful and you should get a drop or two, no more than that. Too dry and the whole thing falls asleep. Too wet and it stinks. Damp like a wrung out cloth, right in the middle, and then it hums along beautifully. That's the lot of it. Those are the two tips. A bad smell means too wet and starved of air, so add your browns and turn it. No action whatsoever usually means too dry, so give it a good drink. Get these two right, and you barely have to lift a finger, and after that, the pile does the rest entirely on its own. You just chuck your scraps and your dead leaves on the top, keep half an eye on how damp it is, and a few months down the line, you reach right down to the bottom, pull out this gorgeous, dark, crumbly stuff that your whole garden will love you for. Honestly, making your own good compost is one of the most satisfying things in the entire garden because you're taking what most folks will just throw in the garbage, peelings, prunings, fallen leaves, and turning it into the best food your soil could ever ask for nothing at all. There's something almost magical about it once it finally clicks for you. And it closes a little loop as well. The garden hands you the scraps. You hand them back to the garden, and then back around it comes. I find that quietly pleasing every single time I tip the kitchen, caddy out onto the heap. So that's where I'm at this week. Heap sorted, browns mixed in, given a proper soak. Keep it damp, keep some browns in it, and give it some air now and then. Do those 3 small things, and compost more or less makes itself. Turns out nobody tells you it's that simple either, but we just did.